You have betrayed the covenant, you have defiled my waters, and you have stolen the lives that belong to me. Today, you shall pay the price. In a land where a vast river flows through the lush green fields of Georgia, there exists a small but vibrant and dedicated community called Okona. This is not a powerful or mighty community, yet their unity and resilience have allowed them to endure for centuries, even when faced with relentless challenges. The Azura River, with its crystal-clear waters and the mystical tales surrounding it, has nurtured and protected the people of this land, not only physically, but also spiritually. However, the Azura River does not only bring peace. This river, the lifeblood of the community, has also borne witness to the unending conflicts between Okona and Elora, a much stronger and more formidable community. Elora, with its powerful military and a long history of violence, constantly poses a threat to the Okona community. The attacks by Elora are not merely acts of war, but invasions with the intent to strip Okona of everything, from its resources to the very lives of its people. Many times, the people of Okona have been abducted, sold into slavery, and forced to live under the brutal domination of Elora. Yet, the people of Okona have never given up hope. They have lived with patience, endured countless days of sorrow, but have never relinquished their belief in freedom and the land they hold dear. Day by day, the people of Okona continue to live in silence, though their hearts are heavy with anxiety. Every rustle of grass or whisper of the wind across the fields could signal an impending attack, but what sets Okona apart from other communities is their unwavering resilience. They believe with steadfast certainty that one day the nightmare will end and Okona will once again thrive in peace. Yet, something unexpected occurred. Their patience had run dry after enduring relentless and brutal assaults. The unending sorrow and countless losses finally pushed the people of Okona to their breaking point. They could endure no more. It was in this moment that King Kofi, their powerful and visionary leader, stood up and decided that the time had come to rise, to confront Elora, even though it meant facing an enemy far stronger and more advanced. King Kofi was a man of vision and courageous heart. He knew that if Okona were to survive, this was the moment to make a harsh decision. Under his leadership, the people of Okona declared war on Elora, despite knowing that their adversary was a military empire with endless resources and unmatched brutality. But there was no other choice. This was a fight for survival, and King Kofi knew that it would end either in victory or in annihilation. But King Kofi's decision was not merely about going to war. The choice of battlefield was a matter of immense importance to the people of Okona. A battle had to be fought in a place of sanctity, a place that could inspire hope and provide strength to the Okona people. This place had to be more than just a battleground. It needed to be infused with the power of faith and supernatural protection. And so the question arose, where would this battlefield be? King Kofi made an unprecedented decision. He chose the area near the Azura River, a place that, according to legend, not only sustained the lives of the villagers, but also served as the dwelling place of a mighty goddess. This goddess was believed to have the power to protect Okona from all invading forces. The Azura River was more than just a river. It was a sacred symbol, a witness to the endurance of the Okona people. Choosing this battlefield was no ordinary decision. It was an affirmation of faith, a reliance on the divine protection that the people of Okona had believed in for thousands of years. According to legend, the goddess Azura, the protector of the river, had come to the aid of the Okona people during difficult times. Invading Eloran warriors often claimed to see strange waves and mermaid-like spirits rising to defend the villagers. And they would meet with devastating failure against the river's mighty guardians. This vivid legend, passed down from generation to generation, instilled a profound belief among the Okona people that the goddess would never abandon them. But this time, could the goddess Azura truly protect them? Would the sanctity of the river and the strength of King Kofi be enough to stand against Elora, a great empire and a formidable force of danger? The answers to these questions would only unfold in the bloody and dramatic battle that was to come, as both Okona and Elora fought for their very survival. That night, the Georgia sky was filled with twinkling stars, but their beauty could not soothe the heavy heart of King Kofi. He walked slowly across the lush green fields, his bare feet feeling the dampness of the night dew, his eyes fixed ahead, toward the legendary Azura River, which flowed silently as if it had existed since the dawn of time. The silence was so profound that he could hear his own sigh mingling with the gentle murmurs of the river. This was no ordinary night. It was the night when the king of the Okona community had to make the most painful decision of his life, a decision that could alter the fate of his entire people. He knew that human strength alone would not be enough to defeat Elora, their powerful and ruthless enemy. He had fought with all he had, his steadfast resolve, his leadership, and his love for his people. But now, it seemed everything was on the brink of collapse. His last hope lay in the supernatural, where prayers might awaken the strength of the gods. When he reached the riverbank, he stopped. The moonlight illuminated the crystal-clear waters, reflecting the sky like a mysterious mirror. The Azura River, a symbol of life and, according to ancient legend, also the dwelling place of death, was said to be the home of the goddess Azura. She was a divine entity of infinite power, protecting the river and those deemed worthy of her guardianship. But to draw the attention of the goddess, to invoke her mercy, required a worthy plea and a great sacrifice. In King Kofi's hands was neither a treasure nor a war trophy, but Prince Jamil, his only son and greatest pride. The boy, only 12 years old, with clear eyes and a gentle smile, was the sole light in Kofi's life of hardship. Jamil did not cry, nor did he resist. He looked at his father, his eyes filled with trust and love. He understood that fate had called his name, and if his sacrifice could save his people, he was ready. "My son," Kofi whispered, his voice hoarse with pain, "you are the most precious gift I have, but tonight you will become a gift for the goddess Azura to save our people." Jamil said nothing. He nodded, took his father's hand, and stepped onto the altar, a large stone slab by the river's edge, where the Okona people once conducted sacred rituals. With trembling hands and a shattered heart, King Kofi laid his son on the altar. Silent tears streamed down his face, mingling with the waters of the Azura River. "O great goddess of the mighty river," he prayed, his voice rising in the stillness, "I offer you my son, my heart, to beg you to protect my people. Grant us the strength to fight and defeat our enemies. I swear that this river will forever belong to you, and no one shall desecrate these sacred waters again." As his words faded, something extraordinary happened. The river's surface began to rise, with small ripples forming into powerful swirls. A sudden sharp wind swept through, cold and biting, carrying the breath of a spirit from the river's depths. The moon seemed to shine brighter, and the riverbank was bathed in an ethereal glow, both mesmerizing and fearsome. The atmosphere grew heavy, as if all of nature was holding its breath for what was about to unfold. Then, from the heart of the river, the goddess Azura emerged. Her appearance was beyond anything mortal imagination could conjure. She was not just a being, she was the embodiment of the river itself. Her skin glowed like pearls, her long hair cascaded like waves crashing upon the shore, and her eyes blazed like thousands of stars, deep and full of power. Every step she took upon the water left gentle ripples, as if the river itself welcomed her presence. She stopped before the altar where Jamil lay and turned to King Kofi. Her gaze was commanding yet compassionate, as though she could see directly into his soul. "You have summoned me," she said, her voice resonating like water flowing over stones, "and you have offered me your most precious gift. But tell me, King of Okona, Do you truly understand the meaning of this sacrifice? King Kofi lowered his head, his voice trembling. Oh, great goddess, I have no other choice. I beg for your help. Without you, my people cannot survive. Take my son and grant us the strength to prevail. The goddess Azura was silent for a moment. Then she stepped closer to the altar, her gaze soft yet filled with immense power. Do you know, King of Okona, that this river does not require the sacrifice of an innocent? The life of this boy is not the key to unlocking my power. She turned to King Kofi, her voice growing firm. I will aid you, but not by taking your son's life. Instead, you must uphold your promise. This river will forever belong to me, and anyone who dares to desecrate it will face my unrelenting wrath. King Kofi nodded, tears streaming down as he knelt before the goddess. I promise, great goddess, I swear to protect this river and honor you for all time. The goddess Azura raised her hand, and the waters around her began to swirl, as though the river itself was affirming her decree. Rise, King of Okona, she said, her voice gentle yet carrying the weight of an eternal vow. You have my protection. But remember, this covenant cannot be broken. Anyone who defiles these sacred waters, whether an invader or your own people, will face my unforgiving wrath. As her final words echoed, the goddess slowly turned, her form dissolving back into the river. The strange light faded and the sky returned to its serene state. But in King Kofi's heart, he knew that everything had changed that night. The goddess Azura had granted her aid, and now he carried renewed hope for his people's battle. King Kofi rose, his eyes shining with newfound determination. He turned, grasping Jamil's hand, and together they left the riverbank. In their hearts, a sacred covenant had been forged. The next morning, the pale sunlight cast its glow upon the Azura River, painting its surface with a mystical golden hue. Thin mists lingered over the river, evoking a sense of mystery. But the Elora army paid no heed. They marched forward, their ranks perfectly aligned, filled with pride and confidence. They believed their might would crush all obstacles, that the land of Okona would soon bow before them. Little did they know, today they would face something far beyond human understanding. On the opposite riverbank, the warriors of Okona stood ready. Atop a high hill, King Kofi, their valiant leader, observed the advancing Elora forces. His eyes burned bright, not from the sunlight, but from an unyielding faith in victory. He felt it, a powerful energy radiating from the Azura River, as though it whispered to him, promising protection for his people. His warriors, though fewer in number, exuded a strange vitality, as if the river itself had infused them with an endless source of strength. As the sun climbed higher, the tension on the battlefield grew palpable. The Elora soldiers' war cries shattered the morning's faint stillness. But before they could strike the first blow, the ground began to tremble. It was not the sound of war drums or galloping horses, but an uncanny quake, as though the earth itself was awakening. The Elora soldiers hesitated, their eyes betraying fear. From the depths of the river, the water began to rise, churning violently like a monstrous tidal wave. The Azura River, once serene, transformed into a ferocious beast. Mystical beings began to emerge from the river, rising into the soft morning light. They were neither fully human nor like any creature the Elora army had ever seen. They bore the majestic appearance of ancient deities, with flowing hair that shimmered like water and eyes that glowed like radiant gemstones. The Okona warriors called them spirits of the river, manifestations of the goddess Azura, whom they worshipped. These beings appeared not only to witness, but to fight, wielding supernatural power that struck terror into their foes. The Elora forces tried to maintain their formation, but chaos quickly ensued. Torrents of water surged from the Azura River, striking their ranks like colossal serpents, sweeping away everything in their path. Soldiers were thrown into the water, where the river's spirits awaited. Slender yet strong hands dragged them into the depths. Their screams mingled with the roar of the water and the howling wind. Meanwhile, the Okona warriors charged into battle with an unstoppable spirit. Every step they took seemed to be supported by the river. and every strike they made carried the force of nature itself. They fought not just with weapons, but with unwavering belief that the goddess stood with them. Their triumphant cries grew louder, drowning out the wails of the Elora forces. From his vantage point, King Kofi missed nothing. He did not revel in the enemy's suffering, but understood that this was the price of blind ambition. "The goddess Azura is with us!" he shouted, his voice thunderous, instilling greater strength in his warriors. His words ignited a fire within their hearts, driving them to fight with unprecedented courage. Within hours, the tide of battle had decisively turned in Okona's favor. The once vaunted Elora soldiers, who prided themselves on being invincible, were reduced to fear and despair. They were forced to retreat, leaving behind not just fallen comrades, but also their shattered pride. The Azura River's banks fell silent again, bearing the scars of the fierce battle and the ever-flowing waters that seemed to recount the tale of Okona's glorious day. The people of Okona poured out from their villages, joyfully welcoming the returning warriors. They knew well that this victory was not solely due to military strength or strategy. It was a triumph born of the Azura River's protection, of their unwavering faith in the divine presence. Together they knelt by the riverbank, bowing their heads in gratitude to the waters that had saved them. The river's surface glistened in the evening sun, as though smiling in acknowledgement of their thanks. The tale of the battle at the Azura River spread quickly across the region, becoming a new legend. Other enemies of Okona, upon hearing the river's name, could not help but shudder. But to the people of Okona, Azura was more than just a river. It was an eternal symbol of protection, faith, and victory. And so, the Azura River continued to flow, carrying with it stories of courage and the extraordinary wonders it had witnessed. Okona's victory over the Elora army ushered in a long era of peace. The survivors of the battle remained deeply grateful and reverent toward the goddess Azura, who had protected them from destruction. The river became a sacred symbol, untouchable by human hands. Yet time, a formidable weapon, began to blur memories, transforming truth into legend and legend into mere folklore. When King Kofi passed away, the people of Okona held the grandest funeral the kingdom had ever seen. To them, he was not only a brilliant leader, but also a symbol of their historic triumphs. His son, King Kamari, ascended the throne with promises of innovation and development for the nation. Under Kamari's reign, the kingdom began to evolve, embracing connections with the outside world. Trade routes expanded, and goods from distant lands flowed into Okona. The younger generations grew up curious about the wider world, and in their eyes, the old values began to fade into obsolescence. During court meetings, young officials often presented bold ideas to King Kamari, constantly urging him toward modernization. One topic of particular interest to them was the Azura River. For centuries, the river had been deemed untouchable. Fishing was forbidden, and no one was allowed to set foot in its waters, as the covenant with the goddess Azura remained etched in the oral traditions passed down by the village elders. However, to the new generation, the stories of the goddess were nothing more than distant fairy tales, warnings crafted by their ancestors to maintain order. They began to question, why are we wasting such a vast resource? Gradually, the idea of exploiting the sacred river began to take shape. One day, during a court session on expanding trade, a group of ambitious young advisors stepped forward with a daring proposal. "Your Majesty," one of them said, his eyes gleaming with determination, "we are squandering an invaluable resource. The Azura River has remained untapped for centuries. If we allow fishing, we could gain untold wealth." The king frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the idea. "Do you know what you are suggesting?" he asked, his tone heavy with doubt. "This is not just a river. It is sacred. The covenant with the goddess Azura still holds meaning." "Your Majesty," another young advisor interjected, "those stories are nothing but myths. Times have changed, and so must we. Why let ourselves be bound by superstitions when opportunities for progress are right before us? Think of the future, the first advisor added. Imagine the wealth, the bridges connecting villages, the trade and prosperity we could achieve. It's all within our grasp. If only your majesty dares to make the decision. King Kamari remained silent, his eyes betraying his internal struggle. Their arguments were not without merit. He wanted to propel Okona into the future, to integrate the kingdom with the wider world. Yet he could not ignore the stories of the goddess Azura, which had been ingrained in him since childhood. Was he making a grave mistake? Or was this his chance to become the greatest king in Okona's history? After days of deliberation, King Kamari summoned a meeting with his trusted advisors. "I have thought long and hard," he began, his voice steady yet somber. "We cannot live in the past forever. It is time for Okona to embrace the future. I have decided to allow fishing in the Azura River, but all activities must be strictly regulated. No harm must come to the river." The king's decision immediately sparked mixed reactions among the court and the people. The youth were elated, seeing it as a monumental step forward for the kingdom's progress. However, the elders, who had lived through the war and witnessed the goddess Azura's power, were horrified. One of the elders, the oldest man in the village, knelt before the king, his trembling hands clasped in supplication. "Your Majesty," he pleaded, "please reconsider. The covenant with the goddess is sacred. What our ancestors sacrificed was not mere words, but their lives, their very souls. Do not let ambition blind you." But King Kamari shook his head. "I respect the past, but I must think of the future. My decision is final." With the decree allowing fishing, the people of Okona swiftly organized teams of boats to venture onto the river. For the first time in centuries, enormous fish with scales shimmering like sunlight were pulled from the water. The villagers, having never seen such wondrous creatures, marveled at the sight. They cheered as they hauled in bountiful catches, dreaming of a prosperous future. However, from the very beginning, ominous signs began to appear. The once crystal-clear river turned murky. The water grew cloudy and a strange, pungent stench pervaded the air. The elders warned, "These are ill omens. The goddess is angered." But no one heeded their words. Greed had drowned out their fears. Strange events soon followed. At night, as the villagers slept, they heard the river murmuring, as though whispering words of discontent. Some claimed to have seen shadowy figures beneath the water, their glowing blue eyes watching, waiting. One day, a large fishing boat laden with fish suddenly capsized in the middle of the river. Survivors reported feeling a powerful force pulling them under, as though invisible hands were trying to drag them into the depths. Those who made it back to shore swore never to return to the river, yet their warnings were not enough to deter others, driven by insatiable greed. The fateful night finally arrived. The moon shone brightly, its reflection casting an eerie glow on the now blackened, unnervingly still Azura River. That night, all who dared to exploit the river would face their reckoning. It began with a howling wind, tearing through the trees. Then, the water suddenly churned, forming massive whirlpools. From the depths, a ghostly blue light surged, illuminating the sky. The goddess Azura appeared, her form majestic and terrifying. Her radiant skin glowed like the moon, her long hair billowed in the wind, and her eyes, blazing green flames, burned with fury. "You have betrayed the covenant," she thundered, her voice echoing through the forests and hills. "You have defiled my waters and stolen the life that belongs to me. Tonight, you shall pay the price." The river swelled, sweeping away everything in its path. Boats overturned, riverside houses were obliterated. Screams filled the air, but there was no escape. Those who had exploited the river were dragged into its depths, never to return. When the storm of wrath subsided, Okona was but a shadow of its former self. The riverside villages lay in ruins, and the survivors could only bow their heads, vowing never to forget the painful lesson. The goddess Azura had departed, but her presence lingered in every ripple, every breath of the river. From that day, the people of Okona renewed their reverence for the Azura River. They rebuilt ancient shrines, offered gifts, and prayed fervently. The stories of the goddess were retold, no longer as mere folklore, but as a vivid warning. "Never awaken the wrath of nature," they told their children, "for it is a power no human can control." Prince Malik, the youngest son of King Kamari, was never one to accept living in the shadow of his father or his siblings. Within him burned an unrelenting ambition, like a flame that refused to extinguish in the ancient forge of Okona's royal lineage. Though born into luxury, Malik was unsatisfied with a life built solely on his family's legacy. He craved to make his own mark, to become a legend in the eyes of his people and, above all, to surpass the limitations imposed by tradition. For years, he had listened to the warnings and myths about the goddess Azura, the sacred covenant with the river. Yet to Malik, these tales were nothing more than distant legends, irrelevant to a changing world. As the world around Okona began to transform, the once isolated stronghold opened up, and rumours spread of the wealth hidden beneath the waters of the Azura River. Some spoke of fish in the river that were not only massive and strong, but also bore dazzling hues, glimmering like jewels under the moonlight. A few daring individuals recounted glimpses of shimmering water, and fish leaping as if enchanted by the river's spirits. Malik's curiosity and greed were ignited. The more he heard, the more he believed that the riches of the river could solidify his legacy, outshining both his father and his ancestors. As King Kamari hesitated to consider exploiting the river, Malik grew impatient. He refused to wait for endless court debates or the conservative elders' protests. He wanted action. That night, as the palace sank into silence with only the rustle of wind through ancient trees near the riverbank, Malik quietly slipped out of his chambers. Clad in dark, inconspicuous clothing devoid of royal insignia, he crept through the palace's stone corridors, where flickering torches cast dancing shadows on the walls, resembling ancient spirits keeping watch. Each step was calculated, for even the slightest sound could alert the guards. Crossing the palace grounds, Malik gazed at the dense forest stretching into the inky darkness. That night, the crescent moon hung like a silver scythe in the sky, its pale light filtering through dewy leaves. The air was thick with the scents of damp earth, fresh grass, and nocturnal blossoms, creating an atmosphere that was both enchanting and unsettling. Clutching his net and primitive fishing tools, crafted through weeks of secret preparation, Malik pushed forward. No one in the royal household knew how meticulously he had practiced casting nets and setting bait. A prince was not meant to engage in such menial tasks, but Malik was resolute. He would be the first to bring back the fabled fish of the Azura River, proving that myths were merely barriers and that human ingenuity could conquer even the sacred. Venturing deeper into the forest, Malik pushed through thickets and undergrowth. At times, he paused to listen to the distant calls of nocturnal birds and the hoots of owls. There were moments when the rustle of leaves sounded like whispers, as if the forest itself was urging him to turn back. But Malik smirked and shook off the unease. He was unafraid. The thrill of risk and danger made his blood surge. After nearly an hour of trekking, he finally reached the riverbank. From afar, the Azura River appeared as a dark, ethereal ribbon, its surface glistening faintly under the moonlight. The silence was so profound that Malik could hear the thudding of his own heart. He scanned the area cautiously, ensuring there were no guards or onlookers. The Azura River, long forbidden, was a place no one dared to disturb. Yet this prohibition only fueled Malik's desire. Kneeling on the damp earth, he set down his net, prepared the bait, and cast it into the icy waters. The cold of the river licked at his hands, as if warning him to retreat. Yet Malik's determination was unshakable. As he waited in the darkness, heart pounding, Malik's mind drifted to his father's words. The Azura River is sacred ground. What seems like mere legend may very well be real. But to Malik, those legends were shackles, hollow threats meant to instill fear. He was determined to prove that times had changed, that humanity could master nature, turning the divine into tangible wealth. Suddenly, the net grew heavy. Malik gripped it tightly, straining with all his strength to pull it up. When he finally hoisted the catch onto the riverbank, his eyes widened in astonishment. The fish inside were enormous, their bodies shimmering with iridescent scales that glowed like gemstones set in a royal crown. Each fish was a masterpiece of nature, blending the deep blue of the ocean, the golden hues of sunset, and the violet red of twilight. They thrashed in the net, creating a strange melody like an otherworldly hymn sung by the spirits of the river. Malik was mesmerized. "Treasure at last," he whispered. These fish alone would make him a hero, the one to unlock infinite riches. No one had dared to attempt this before, not even his father. This would be Malik's path to surpassing the old glory of his lineage. Carefully, he transferred the fish into a large sack, ensuring their scales remained intact and none escaped. Then, exhilarated, he hurried back to the palace, oblivious to the fact that he had angered a force far beyond human comprehension. When Malik returned to the palace, it was late into the night. Moving stealthily through the courtyard, he avoided the drowsy guards. Once inside the royal kitchen, he summoned a few trusted cooks. They were astonished to see the prince arrive with a heavy sack brimming with enormous fish, but Malik silenced their questions with a gesture. "Prepare a feast like no other," he whispered, his eyes gleaming with ambition. "By morning, when my father dines, I want the finest fish dish he has ever tasted. Do not ask where these came from. Just do as I say." The cooks, captivated by Malik's commanding presence, nodded and set to work. The aroma of fresh fish and spices soon filled the air. Malik stood by, arms crossed, imagining the scene. At dawn, King Kamari would sit at the table astonished. He would ask, "Where did you find such fish?" And Malik would answer with a triumphant smile. The thought made his heart race, his veins pulsing with excitement. However, as the first knife touched the fish's luminous scales, something strange occurred. The torches flickered, as if a cold wind had swept through the kitchen. The once roaring fire in the hearth crackled and dimmed. One cook muttered nervously, "Strange, the flames have never behaved like this before." Malik frowned but dismissed it as coincidence. Moments later, an eerie whisper filled the room. At first, it was faint, like the sound of wind through a crack in the door. Gradually, it grew louder, resembling mournful singing from a far-off place. Another cook shuddered. "Do you hear that? It's like someone crying or singing. It's haunting." Malik strained to listen, a chill running down his spine. "There's no one here. Focus on your work," he snapped, masking his unease with authority. But deep within, a gnawing dread began to take hold. When the largest fish was cut open, the knife struck something solid. The cook paused, then peeled back the flesh to reveal a collection of gleaming black stones, arranged in unnatural, grotesque patterns. "By the gods!" the cook gasped. "What is this?" Malik leaned closer, his pulse quickening. A foul stench rose unlike any fish he'd ever encountered, an odor of damp earth mixed with metallic blood. The sight and smell drove the cooks to retreat in fear. Then the air in the kitchen shifted. The windows flew open and an icy wind surged inside, extinguishing nearly all the torches. Darkness enveloped the room. Malik shouted, "Light the torches, quickly!" But before anyone could respond, a piercing scream echoed through the air, a sound of countless anguished souls wailing as one. The ground trembled, pots and knives clattered to the floor. In the chaos, a ghostly blue light illuminated the window overlooking the river. From the shadows emerged a towering figure, the goddess Azura. Her translucent skin glowed like moonlit crystal, her flowing black hair billowed as if caught in an unseen current, and her eyes, two blazing green stars, bored into Malik's soul. She did not need to speak. Her presence alone was judgment incarnate. A single gesture from her hand, and water surged into the room from the walls, the cracks in the floor and the shattered windows. It rose rapidly, turning the kitchen into a churning, murky swamp. Malik screamed, "Who are you? What do you want?" But he knew the answer. The legends, the warnings, all were true, now manifest before him. Azura said nothing. She tilted her head, regarding him with a mixture of contempt and pity, as one might observe an ant about to be crushed. A torrent of water lashed out, striking Malik and knocking him to the ground. The cooks cried out, clinging to anything they could, but they too were swept away, disappearing into the whirlpool. The palace descended into chaos. Soldiers rushed to the scene but were overwhelmed by the flood pouring through the halls. In the tumultuous waters, some swore they glimpsed shadowy figures, fierce, vengeful spirits with flowing hair and razor-sharp claws, dragging victims into the depths. Their cries for help were drowned out by the roaring waters. In the throne room, King Kamari, awakened by the commotion, called for his guards, but the flood blocked every escape. The once mighty palace crumbled as columns toppled, windows shattered, and debris floated amidst the rising waters. Kamari shouted for his son, his soldiers, anyone, but no one answered. Azura, now the embodiment of ancient wrath, advanced through the palace amidst the deluge. She did not deliver a speech or justify her actions. Her vengeance was swift and absolute. As Malik struggled to escape, clinging to a wooden beam, he met her gaze. In that moment, he understood the magnitude of his folly. He had violated the sacred covenant, stolen what belonged to the divine, and awakened a fury beyond human comprehension. "Forgive me!" Malik cried. "Please, spare me!" But the only response was the deafening roar of the river. A spiraling vortex of water tore through the room, engulfing him completely. He was tossed like a rag doll, choking on the muddy current, his cries silenced as he sank into an abyss of cold darkness. Meanwhile, King Kamari, trying to reach his son, was swept away by a powerful wave. A column of water rose like a barrier, hurling him against a stone pillar. Blood mixed with the rising flood as his consciousness faded, the last image in his mind being Azura's glowing eyes. Outside the palace, the villagers of Okona watched in terror as the Azura River rose unnaturally high around the royal estate. They heard the screams, the crashes, but none dared approach. They knew this was the goddess's wrath, a punishment for the royal family's transgressions. They prayed, wept, and called upon their ancestors for a miracle, but Azura's judgment was unyielding. The waters continued to rise until the palace was submerged, only the tips of its spires visible above the surface. Flickering torches from afar cast eerie reflections on the rippling water, like the malevolent eyes of a vengeful deity. By dawn, the floodwaters receded, revealing a scene of utter devastation. The once magnificent palace lay in ruins, submerged in water and debris. No one survived. Corpses floated alongside shattered beams, broken stone, and tattered fabrics. Azura had turned the palace into a grim testament to human folly and greed. She reminded all who witnessed that no matter how advanced or forgetful humanity becomes, it cannot escape the judgment of the ancient powers that protect the land. The people of Okona realized that the sacred covenant with the Azura River could never be taken lightly. King Kamari and Prince Malik had brought destruction upon the royal family. With no monarchy left, no old laws to bind them, the people returned to their silent reverence of the river. They feared it, but they also understood that fear was necessary to maintain order. They retold the story of that harrowing night to future generations, ensuring that the lesson was never forgotten. In the vast, mysterious world, there are forces that humans must never disturb. Not all progress or exploitation is worth the cost. And so, amidst Georgia's lush greenery, the Azura River resumed its quiet flow. Its serene surface reflected the sky's clouds as if nothing had ever happened. But those who had witnessed the events knew the truth. Beneath the tranquil waters lay an ancient power, ready to rise again if provoked. The people of Okona, from that day on, revered and respected the Azura River more than ever. They passed down this tale to their children so that future generations would understand unchecked ambition and arrogance against sacred rules would ultimately lead to ruin. Prince Malik and the royal family became a painful memory, lost to the cold waters. Yet it was their downfall that ensured Okona's survival. a perpetual reminder to tread lightly in a world where nature's divine forces reign supreme. When the eerie blue light finally faded, the Azura River returned to its deceptively tranquil state. Its surface lay still, reflecting the cold glow of the moon like a mirror, but all who witnessed the events knew that everything had changed forever. The goddess Azura, with a power far beyond human comprehension, had left an indelible mark on the land of Okona and its people. King Kamari, once at the pinnacle of power and glory, was now a broken man. He knelt on the riverbank, his head bowed, hands clutching the damp earth. A cold wind swept past, carrying the murmurs of the river as if to remind him of his irreversible mistakes. Behind him, the weight of the village's silent stares bore down on him, cutting into his pride like knives. "What have I done?" Kamari whispered, his voice choking with despair. Tears blurred his vision as he stared at the ground. He had violated the ancient covenant of his ancestors, desecrated the sacred river, and now the consequences extended beyond himself, burdening the entire kingdom. From the river, a voice arose, sharp and icy as a blade. "Kamari, you were warned. The covenant of your ancestors was not to be taken lightly. The Azura River has protected you, nourished you, and yet you repaid it with greed and arrogance. Today, you and your kingdom shall pay the price." The goddess Azura did not need to appear again. Her power and wrath still permeated the air. Her judgment was absolute, leaving no room for excuses or pleas for mercy. Kamari remained on his knees, his body trembling as he forced out one final plea. "Goddess Azura, I am sorry. I was blinded by my own folly. But please spare my people. They do not deserve to bear this punishment." One misty morning, as the sun began to rise over the distant mountains, the villagers gathered at the riverbank. They brought offerings, fresh flowers, fruits, and small tokens they believed would please the goddess. The priest stood at the center, holding an ancient clay vessel passed down through generations. It contained water from the Azura River, symbolizing life and reverence. As he began his prayer, his voice resonated through the still air, serving as a solemn reminder of the river's sanctity. "O great goddess of our river Azura, we have wronged you. Please accept this humble offering and forgive us. We swear never to forget this lesson, never to desecrate your waters again." When the prayer ended, something miraculous occurred. The surface of the Azura River rippled gently, as if acknowledging their plea. Sunlight broke through the mist, forming a radiant halo around the river. The villagers exchanged glances, tears welling in their eyes. They knew the goddess had heard them. After the ceremony, the priest declared, "It is time for us to choose a new leader, but this leader cannot be one of greed or disrespect for nature. This leader must be one of us, someone who understands the value of humility and reverence." The villagers agreed. They deliberated for days, discussing who among them was worthy to lead. Ultimately, they chose Ugo, an elderly farmer who lived on the outskirts of the village. Ugo was not a prominent figure, but he was deeply respected for his honesty and compassion. He had always upheld traditions and never prioritized personal gain over the community. When Ugo was called to the riverbank to accept his role, he knelt before the priest, his eyes filled with apprehension. "I am just a farmer. I do not know how to be a king," he said. The priest placed a reassuring hand on Ugo's shoulder and smiled. "That is precisely why you are the right choice. A true leader does not seek power but is willing to protect what matters most." Ugo was crowned, not with a golden crown but with a simple wreath made of plants from the Azura River's edge. It symbolized the bond between humanity and nature. Under the leadership of King Ugo, the villagers of Okona gradually regained the peace they had lost. Gone were the fortified stone walls and the opulent throne. Ugo chose to live in a simple house near the Azura River. He wanted to remind his people that true strength lies not in wealth or power, but in respect and humility before nature. The Azura River, after its wrath, flowed calmly once more, but its tranquility now carried a deeper significance. Its crystal-clear waters, reflecting the sunlight, served as a reminder that beneath the serene surface lay the invisible power of the goddess Azura, ever vigilant over their actions. The villagers continued to pass down the stories of the goddess. These were not just tales of the consequences of arrogance and greed, but also stories of hope and redemption. The elders recounted the terrifying wrath of the goddess to their children and grandchildren, but they also emphasized her mercy in granting them a chance to atone for their mistakes. Yet deep within every soul lingered a persistent question: would the forgiveness of the goddess Azura last forever? Would a future generation once again forget these lessons? The Azura River, like a reflective mirror, posed a silent challenge to the villagers. Have you truly changed? When night fell and the river sparkled under the moonlight, some villagers thought they could see the goddess's silhouette in the water. Gentle ripples lapping at the shore seemed like a soft yet firm reminder that nature demands reverence. In his final years, King Ugo often stood by the riverbank, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Once he spoke to his people. "We have been forgiven, but this lesson must endure forever. Never let greed or indifference lead us back to the abyss." And so the story of Okona, along with the Azura River, continued to inspire not only the villagers, but also anyone who took the time to listen. It served as a reminder that respecting nature is not just a responsibility, but a condition for our survival on this planet. What do you think of the story of the Azura River and the lessons from the people of Okona? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know if you resonate with this message and would like to see part 2 of the story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to African Tales Best. If you're an African American, share this tale with your friends, family, and loved ones in the United States to help preserve our culture and the history of these folk stories. Join us as we explore more magical tales like this one. Who knows, perhaps the Azura River still holds secrets waiting to be discovered.